When did you decide that you wanted to become a writer?
Well, I was interested in writing from a very early age, from actually around third grade, when I wrote what was probably a very stupid little short story about fish living under the sea. I don't remember much more about that. In terms of actually deciding it was my career path, it was actually after I had left college, so in my early 20s.
What do you think growing up influenced your decision to become a writer?
My parents and the fact that they read a lot. They were big newspaper readers. They bought me books. My mother used to sit me down, and I actually enjoyed this despite my other feelings about my mother, which we won't get into here. You can read the book. She used to sit me down and would start through the dictionary, starting at A and go right through, and I don't think we ever finished, but I remember aardvark was the first word and abilene was the second. But there was reading and writing were very important in my household, so that's where it came from.
Did you plan out how you were going to become a writer, or was it sort of a play-by-ear thing?
It was not planned out. It was serendipity, which is, I guess, another way of saying play by ear. Just kind of happened. But again, I always liked writing, so it wasn't a question of like I woke up one day and went, ooh, I think I like writing.
What was your first writing piece to ever be published?
It was a story about a blizzard in 1978, which was published in my very small hometown weekly and horrible daily newspaper, the Wakefield Daily Item. And I was living in Boston at that time. And I wrote sort of an essay about what it was like being in Boston at that time, and it was a horrible piece of crap. I didn't start off. But they liked it, so actually I did at the time. I read it now, as I have actually in the last few years, and it's like loaded with cliches.
You just answered 3 of my questions.
Well, there you go. We're moving right through this.
All right.
The lead of that story was the plane sat at Logan like wounded dinosaurs. I remember that. That is like, you can't get much worse than that.
Yeah, how do you know about a wounded dinosaur?
I have no idea. I'm just poeticalized. I told you it was awful. Not as bad as my high school poetry, which we won't ever get into, although I still have some of it. In one of these yearbooks, actually, I was like the poetry person.
Do you ever read your own writing for enjoyment?
No.
No?
No, never. I mean, I'll read a newspaper piece after, but you mean in terms of books? No.
Well,
I've never read one of my books. After the editing, obviously.
Well, then, do you believe that you're a good writer? Or?
I think I'm a decent writer. I mean, I've had some success at it. But, let other people decide.
Who do you look up to as a writer?
My immediate answer is Stephen King, who I've loved forever and ever, since his second book. Actually, I didn't read his first. And there are a lot of nonfiction writers that I really admire, too. Jonathan Harr is one of them, Richard Rhodes, Christopher Buckley. I could go on. But those are among the ones I like.
Why don't you write horror, then, if your favorite author is a horror writer?
I did, and my first book was a horror novel. But then I sort of got off into doing nonfiction books. But I actually wrote a horror story last summer.
Really?
First, yeah. Wasn't bad. First one I'd written in a long time, but...
Do you enjoy writing nonfiction? Seems kind of boring to me.
Well, let's not make value judgments. You're just supposed to ask the question. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed it a lot. I probably like fiction better, but I'm not feeding you on my fiction, so let's put it that way. There's a money aspect to this, and my fiction has never sold well or at all. Some have sold it.
How long does it take you to write a book on average?
Usually about 3 minutes. I'm just kidding. I would guess a year. I mean, it varies book by book, project by project. That's sort of a short answer.
Have you ever started writing a book and then just decided that it wasn't worth it or it wasn't a good idea and stopped?
Many, many times. There's a drawer full of floppy disks with books that I've started in. But that's, by the way, true of all writers. It's the old writer's trunk. I mean, I can't even tell you how many I've started and haven't finished because they suck so bad. It's true. That's part of the writing process.
Would you say that being a writer is easy or hard?
That's a good question. It can be easy and it can be hard. It can be very frustrating. And if it's like your career path and you want to make money, don't go into it. You kind of don't choose it. I know that sounds like groovy. You feel you're compelled to do it.
Do you honestly enjoy being a writer?
Yes. I can't imagine doing anything else. Except making films now. But that all is part of the same process.
What was your second choice if you failed becoming a writer?
I wanted to be a neurosurgeon.
And you chose writer?
I know. I did, and here's what happened. My first week at college, I went to Harvard planning to be a neurosurgeon. My first week I get into this upper class creative writing course, and they let in like, one or two undergrads. You had to compete for it, and I get in, and it was like, that was cool. And then I looked at all the study it would take, all the science and statistics and biochemistry and stuff, and I just... I'm sure you think it's a bad career choice, given that you don't have like a pony or something, which I can't afford to buy.
Do you want a pony?
I don't think he wants a pony.
How do you think your life would be different if you'd never become a writer?
I'd be bored. I'm not bored very often.
I don't think being a neurosurgeon would be very boring.
Have you seen neurosurgery?
No.
I have. It's boring. And by the way, you have to be really good at it, or as the old saying goes, oops, there go the piano lessons. It's an old neurosurgical joke. But I have seen it several times, actually, with the chief of neurosurgery at Children's Hospital and the Brigham and Women's Hospital.
Does the place or the atmosphere in which you write affect your writing? Like, say, writing in this room
Yes,
versus
absolutely.
writing in a hospital?
Yep, absolutely. I write best in this room, and I'm less productive elsewhere, especially in a newsroom where people are constantly talking. It's hard to write anything serious there, although you can write silly little ass stuff.
What about your mood? Like, for example, how's your writing different when you're angry than when you're happy?
Sometimes writing can ease anger. That's an interesting question. I never thought about it. Mood obviously affects the quality of what you're writing, but I've never really analyzed what mood leads to what quality of writing.
How has your writing changed throughout your life? Like the style or the way in which you
I've
write?
gotten less cliched, and I've realized that I'm not a stylist. Some people are. I have a friend at the New York Times, Dan Barry, who's a great stylist. He can turn a phrase. I'm not good at that. So I realized that my strengths were sort of narrative and structure and detail.
What did you major in college?
English. And other activities that we don't need to go into. English, by the way, is a great major for the other activities. It buys you time.
Do you think that your major, English, has significantly helped or altered your writing?
Yeah. Yes. Deepened my appreciation for reading and literature and writing.
No, you can't learn how to be a good writer.
No, you can't, and that's absolutely true. I think people who take writing courses and past a certain point, it's just bullshit, bull stuff. The way to learn to write is to write and to read.
Have you ever tried writing poetry instead of prose?
Yes, in high school, I mentioned earlier, I won't embarrass myself, but it's awful. I do respect poetry, but I certainly can't do it.
Why do you write?
Because you feel compelled. Because if I don't, I get antsy and weird. You do it to exercise demons, maybe.
Well, thank you, Wayne.
Thank you, George Calvin. That would be my son.